All right, welcome back to College Football Addiction. Some big coaching news today impacting a couple of pretty large programs that we'll talk about here with Wilson Dittman. We appreciate you for your time, bud. Video presented by BetUS. We'll talk about them a little bit later, but how you doing, man?
Doing all right. Big news today. Again, Tony White off to Florida State. Nothing too unexpected, but big news for both programs. Yeah, I'm sure we'll get into it.
Yeah, so it had been rumored and it had kind of been tossed around. I watched your video this morning, which we'll link your YouTube there in the comments and give you a chance to shout that out in a sec. But just you said not super surprising that he would leave, but start out with like kind of Nebraska's side of things. Nebraska's defense was at times really good this year, rated really highly in both total defense and just a lot of advanced analytics. Is it kind of a blow though? Like even if it's not super surprising, what are the thoughts, the reaction there?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a blow for Nebraska. Tony White's one of the best defensive coordinators in college football, of course, previously with Syracuse before he went to Nebraska. This was a guy who, when the Huskers hired him, they expected him to be a future head coach down the line. So it is shocking from the angle that he's taking another defensive coordinator job. Matt Rule expected him to take a head coaching job. But yeah, one of the better defensive coordinators in college football in Nebraska. Top 20 defense last year, top 20 defense once again this year. Florida State gets their guy here with Tony White, but Nebraska now looking to pivot, see if they can get an outside hire. A lot of names being thrown around, but not too shocking.
What for the Florida State fans watching, what made him so good? Like is it Nebraska recruits pretty well. They obviously have talented players, but Florida State for the most part recruits pretty well in the ACC too. And so player for player probably going to be somewhat similar. But what made his defense so good? What are Nebraska fans losing and what are Florida State fans gaining?
Yeah, he's a general as a defensive coordinator. Expects a lot of you as a player. Again, he has no problem, talking to you if you're not doing your job. Get a new guy in there. Of course, really good recruiter. Brought a lot of West Coast recruits to Nebraska, so that's what Florida State's getting, a new guy who can, get guys from California, get guys from the West Coast all over. But again, guy who really is a player's coach, but also again expects the highest of everybody. Runs a 3-3-5, which in three defensive linemen, three linebackers, five defensive backs, which puts speed on the field, allows five defensive backs all time. So he likes a very aggressive defense, forcing turnovers, good in the passing game. So Tony White, one of the better defensive coordinators in all of college football. Now, I think a lot of Nebraska fans expected the Huskers defense to be better than it was this year. It still was top 20. They were expecting top 10, even top 5. But Tony White, in all accounts, really good play caller as well, is not scared to dial up the blitz. But Florida State fans, they should get used to that 3-5, but a guy who does develop the best out of his players and brings the best out of them.
Yeah, when Florida State's defense did not force turnovers this year. I believe they had three going into the last 2 weeks. Had a couple against a FCS opponent in Charleston Southern, then had one against Florida. So against non FCS competition, had four total for the year. Would expect that to increase a little bit. Florida State also never played zone. They only manned up. Which was pretty interesting. I don't know that their coaches knew how to coach zone or teach it, and so they weren't very multiple back there. Like it was just you knew what you were getting, and they weren't super aggressive. So I think that's something that will certainly be a change. They played a little bit more 4-2-5 this year. So again, obviously brand new system. It's going to be very different, and obviously personnel will impact that too. In some bigger games, I want to get your thoughts on this because obviously what the defense was their product as a whole. But how much people like to focus on the box scores of one games, whether it's like really highs or really lows. Obviously, they held Colorado to less than anyone else did this year, and that'd probably be the highlight of the year defensively. And then against Indiana, they gave up a lot of points. Now there were a lot of turnovers in that game that led to it too. But just thoughts on maybe those two games specifically in the defensive performance. We will get right back to chatting with Wilson, but first, do me a favor and head on over to BetUS. You can use our code YouTube150 for 150% sign-up bonus on your first deposit, 125% on your next two, all of that up to $2,000. Again, use the code YouTube150, YouTube150 over at BetUS today. We appreciate BetUS.
Yeah, I just think that was the story of Nebraska all year was the inconsistency. A lot of times, this defense showed up in games like Colorado where they shut down Shador Sanders, shut down Travis Hunter for the majority of that game. And we played the number one of the number one teams in the country, the Ohio State Buckeyes on the road, only gave up 21 points. That was a game where Nebraska should have won. But then you look at that Indiana game, of course, 56 points off. Defense really did not show up any aspect. So that was the one thing with Tony White was just the defense was not consistent, especially on the road. But what was consistent was stopping the run. Nebraska did not give up a single rushing touchdown at home all season long, something that hasn't happened since the 90s. So that's what Florida State fans can expect that, Tony White really does a good job stopping the run, did that at Nebraska, one of the best run stopping defenses in the country. Now, he did struggle stopping the pass, especially this year at Nebraska, but at Syracuse, that was really his forte. He got a lot of NFL draft picks in the secondary for the Orange. So, again, this is a guy who was a really, really good defensive coordinator. It's just there was some inconsistencies there, and even he gave up 25 points to Wisconsin at home, which that's not a great Wisconsin football team. Of course, they were coming off of firing their offensive coordinator, so he was inconsistent, but again, very aggressive, really high ceiling, and I think this is a home run hire by the Seminoles.
So something you noted on Twitter and something that's also been reported is it seems like Terrence Knighton is going to join him. One of the better defensive line coaches, but a really good recruiter coming along with him. Obviously, for Nebraska, the news just that doesn't sit great, right? Like it, kind of add salt to the wound. And then for Florida State, probably something to be excited about. They haven't recruited the defensive line very well at the high school level. They've done a good job out of the portal for sure. But thoughts on Knighton?
Yeah, that's a big get for Florida State. I think, a lot of people were expecting Tony White to maybe move on, but the Terrence Knight move really came out of nowhere. This is a guy who brought the best out of our defensive line. When Nebraska originally hired him, he was an assistant with the Panthers, came along with Matt Rule. We were questioning the hire. Of course, Barros, extensive history as an NFL player, but not really a great history as a coach. But he really was phenomenal over the last 2 years. Great developer, brought the best out of a lot of these players on the D line, and brought Nebraska to a top 20 D line in all of college football. But he was also a phenomenal recruiter, really built some good ties, in the state of Texas, around Florida, and even in the West Coast as well, was bringing in some good talent. Nebraska has multiple four-star defensive linemen in this 25 class thanks to him. So really big loss there, and it also should be mentioned that Florida State took another one of Nebraska's coaches, not now, but recently, and Philip Simpson, who was an analyst who really helped the Huskers with recruiting, has a lot of ties to Florida. So he's been at Florida State over the last year or so. So now with three Nebraska coaches going over to Florida State, there's a lot of concern that some of Nebraska's best defensive linemen or best defensive players might be moving on, especially those Florida guys. So something to be noted there. But Terrence Knight, that's a big loss for Nebraska. Hopefully, again, there's some word that it's not a done deal there, that he might stay with the Huskers. I know Matt Rule really is trying to prioritize him, pay him more money, give him a title change. That's how good of a defensive line coach he is, but we will see what happens there.
If like you said, not a done deal yet. Seems like things trending that way. But where does Nebraska go from here? Both with if White and Knighton are both gone, is it fair to say that Nebraska leaned on their defense quite a bit this year with a true freshman quarterback, a true freshman quarterback whose ceiling is absolutely massive. But where do they go? How do they rebound from that? Or are there any names in your mind that you're like, man, this would be a great target to go after?
Yeah, it's a huge concern. Nebraska absolutely, the defense was the focal point of this team. The offense really struggled for the most part, of course, moving on from their offensive coordinator, Marcus Satterfield, after 9 games. Moved on to Dana Holgerson, those final three, who was an outside hire. Nebraska didn't even have a top 60 offense in all of college football. So it is absolutely safe to say that we relied a lot on our defense. It's going to be interesting to see what they do from here. Matt Rule said time and time again he likes to promote from within. Nebraska hired John Butler, our defensive backs coach, late in last summer with the expectation that he would be the next defensive coordinator when Tony White left. However, the secondary did struggle for Nebraska, so I don't think a lot of Husker fans would be too excited with that move. The names that I'm watching out for, number one, Jim Leonard, of course, past defensive coordinator at Wisconsin. That would be That would be a huge one. Of course, now he's with the Broncos. I want to say as a defensive backs coach. So that's the number one guy I'm watching out for. But I think more likely than not, we go ahead and hire John Butler, who's currently our DB's coach. Another name that's been flown around, Elijah Robinson, who was the past defensive line coach at Texas A&M, now defensive coordinator at Syracuse. Another guy with a really high ceiling. But those would be home run hires, in my opinion. John Butler, not so much. We will see what happens.
Man, I appreciate you for taking some time and chatting this afternoon. Where can people follow you for more Nebraska content, more of the news and info coming out on the Cornhuskers?
Yeah, absolutely. Fastest growing Nebraska football page, Wilson Dittman Sports. Just look that up on YouTube. Post daily Husker football content, breaking news, recruiting, game reactions, whatever it is, every single day. So make sure to just put Wilson Dittman Sports into YouTube, and that's where you will find me. Thank you so
Cool.
much, man.
Yeah, we'll link that in the description. Again, appreciate BetUS for their support, and I appreciate you, Bud, for taking some time and chatting.
Absolutely. Thank you.